In this slidecast, we're going to look at variations. So what is a variation? A variation is a change to the contract works. It is essentially a change to the contract agreement. So for example, the contract agreement might have had that you were building a road which had two footpaths, one either side. And then the client decides that, oh no, he wants to remove one of the footpaths. That is a change to the original contract agreement. So a variation is a change to the contract agreement. In this case, it's a deduction of works. It might be that the client decides that he wants to make the footpaths wider, in which case that would be an addition to the contract agreement. So section 9 covers all the variations required to be able to do this, how it's done, how a variation is initiated, how it is the original contractual agreement is changed to accommodate that variation. And it also sets out the requirement that the contractor has to carry out variations that are within the contract scope. So within reason. So that means that if you say you're building a road and the client says, I want you to build a house for me as part of this contract, then the contractor doesn't have to do it, because that is not part of the original. It's not even close to the original agreement. The original agreement was to build a road, and now the client wants to add something to it, which would be to build a house, which is totally different. However, if the client wanted to widen the footpaths on the road, then that is a change that would be acceptable as a variation to the contract. So the reasons for the variations is the client may wish to amend the design. Often happens, you're sort of constructing away and you're looking at it and thinking, oh no, it would be better if that footpath was over there, 2 meters to the left of what was intended. Or it would be a good idea if we built this bridge foundation for a bridge that might be built in the future, so that when we build the bridge in the future it's not going to be so expensive. So as you're sort of building, things change and sometimes you need to add stuff. But more commonly there's discrepancies in the original contract. For example, if you're installing a pipeline, the original agreement might have been that you were installing a pipeline in clay. So the geotechnical investigations showed that it was clay, and so the agreement was that we're constructing the pipeline in clay. When it comes time to do the construction, you open it up and you find that there's a whole lot of rock there. You missed a big chunk of rock. Now that is not part of the original agreement. The original agreement was to excavate in clay. Now you're excavating in rock, which is different. It's going to cost more. So that is a discrepancy in the original contract, and a variation would be made to allow the contractor to excavate in rock and be paid the extra and be given the extra time for it as well. The types of variations: increase or decrease in quantity. So using our road example, increase might be we've decided to make the two footpaths on either side of the road 2 meters wide instead of 1 meter wide. We've decided that we want to include a cycle lane and that we want to make them wider. That would be an increase. Decrease might be you decide that you want to make them thinner. So maybe you want to make them 900 mils instead of 1 meter, whatever. So that would be a decrease in the quantity of the work. You can also omit any work. You might decide we only need a footpath on one side of the road, so we're going to omit the other one. We're going to remove that from the contract, and so the contractor doesn't have to build it anymore. Change the character or quality of any work or material. You might decide that you'd like to, the original agreement was that it was going to be built in concrete. The footpaths were going to be made out of concrete. You might decide, oh, we want it a bit more classy, we're going to make it out of paving stones, for example. So that would be changing the character of the material. So it was concrete, now it's paving stones. Or change the line, position or dimensions of any part of the contract works. Using the footpath example, you may decide that it would be better if one of the footpaths was about 1 meter away from the road, 1 meter more away from the road. When you're doing the construction, you think, oh yeah, it'd be much better if it looked like that. So you can do that. It's a variation, changes the line of the road, of the footpath. The way a variation is implemented is the engineer issues what's called a variation order. This is how the budget is changed. So you will have a contractual agreement for a certain amount of money. In this case, the contract price is 1.5 million, actually this is the second variation. So the contract price was in the order of 1.5 million dollars, and what a variation order does is it changes that price. So the contract price that was submitted by the tenderer is the contract price at that particular point in time. That price is amended each time that there's a variation. Usually, sometimes variations are cost neutral, in which case there's no cost increase whatsoever, so there wouldn't be a variation order issued. But when the variation involves a change in cost, in other words the contractor is being paid more or is being paid less, then the variation order keeps a track of it. So you can see that in this case the change was once we'd started doing the work, the client said we don't really want cast iron lids and frames on our pump station, sorry, on our valve chamber. We want these special Peltec covers, which are much more sophisticated, much easier for operators to get in. In fact, what happened here was the operators looked at these frames and said, oh, we don't want those, we want these ones. So we responded to it and issued this contract order. So we deduct the cost of the cast iron lid and frames, which were in the original agreement. We add in the costs of the new type of covers. So these are covers that go on top of a chamber. Notice we've also got on-site overheads. These are the costs to the contractor of processing that variation. The contractor had to go away. In this case, I issued what's called a variation price request. I asked them to tell me how much for these covers. He had to go away and find out how much it cost. He had to send me an email telling me how much it cost. There were discussions with me. He had to send me through drawings and stuff like that. So that 10% covers all the costs of the on-site overheads of the foreman who is on-site to do it. There's also the costs someone might have had to have checked the Peltec covers when they came on site. So that's what that 10% is for. There might also have been off-site overheads. If there'd been an extension of time, for example, that would have meant that the contractor's office people would have been working on this project for a bit longer. If it had taken another extra week to put in these covers, that's an extra week to the contract. That's an extra week that the contractor's administration people have to be covering the administration of this project. So that would have been an off-site overhead because those administration peoples are not on site. In this case it didn't happen, so there's no off-site overhead. So we add up all of those costs, so the actual cost of the work plus the on-site overhead plus the off-site overheads if there are any, 2,729. There's a previous variation, variation 1 was for 20,000, so the total variations to date are 23,000. We add that to the original contract price. In this case we add it to the price that's already been amended for variation 1. So we add the 2,729 to that to get this. So that is now the new contract price. I mentioned off-site and on-site overheads. On-site overheads are the reason why these are required is because a variation can mean an extension of the contract period. That should read contract period. Extension of the contract period, which means that there's more administration and overheads that are incurred by the contractor, and that's what these things cover, these overheads. Overheads are additional costs. So these are the costs of the people in the office doing the payroll, the supervisors, all of those sort of things. So on-site overheads are for the general running of the contract works, the on-site management, longer bonds. So if the work is extended by a week, then the bonds have to be in place for an extra week and you have to pay the premiums for an extra week. And if you have hire of on-site facilities, they have to be on site for a bit longer as well. Off-site overheads are not incurred on site, so that would be the administration person doing the timesheets for an extra period of time, the director if he's sort of having to keep an eye on the works, and profit. That's a week. The time, if it ran over for about a week, then that's a week where those workers aren't working on another job, making more profit for their company. Day works. One way of doing a variation is you can either do it with a lump sum price, in which case you ask the contractor how much to do the work, he gives you a price and off you go. Another way to do it is to just pay him for the work, so it's like a cost plus agreement. So the contractor works, you keep a track of the hours, you pay him on a hourly basis using the pre-agreed rates which are in the contract document. We'll look at that in the next slide. So minor work items, because you are all the risk is being taken by the principal. There's no reason why the contractor wants to be doing it really quickly, because he's being paid for it anyhow, and there's a profit on top for him. So really minor work items where it's not worth doing the paperwork for a lump sum agreement. So in a contract document, you usually see a day work section like this. So you'll just pick these hours. These are just arbitrary. So you say, oh, 25 hours, we're going to have the supervisor. So what you're saying is you're estimating in the course of this project, so this is in the schedule of quantities, in the course of this project we estimate that the supervisor will have 25 hours extra work to do because of variations. So you can see that they're all 25, so it's pretty arbitrary. Now these are what's called provisional items, which means they don't have to be expended. They are expended on the order of the engineer. If the engineer doesn't need to expend them, then the contractor doesn't get paid for them. And you can see that these rates here are what the contractor puts in, and so this all becomes part of the tender price. So it's in the contractor's interest to keep these as low as possible, otherwise his contract price is going to be a bit high. The other thing covered by this section is unforeseen physical conditions. This is a way of determining if a variation is the responsibility of the contractor or the principal. So site physical conditions such as rock or exceptionally heavy rain that could not have been reasonably foreseen by an experienced contractor at the time of tendering, that is regarded as unforeseen physical conditions. So a contractor will claim something, they might strike rock or they might have exceptionally heavy rain for a long period of time, and they'll say this is a physical condition that we could not have reasonably foreseen, therefore it is to be a variation to the contract. So if something is regarded as an unforeseen physical condition, it is regarded as a variation, which means that the principal will end up paying the extra time and cost incurred by the contractor. So you can see that what an unforeseen physical condition is that the principal is taking the risk. The principal, if they strike rock or if it rains for an exceptionally long period of time, then the principal is taking the risk and will pay the contractor any loss because of those things when they happen. When they're approved, if it is regarded as an unforeseen physical condition, then it is regarded as a variation and there are time and cost implications.